As a C++ developer, you have a number of options in the development environment that you choose to operate in. And this can be somewhat intimidating and confusing for people, especially those new to programming. And so let's talk about, first of all, what's absolutely required to do C++ programming. Well, as it turns out, there are only really two items. The first one is quite obvious, a place to actually write the code that you want to run, and then a compiler which is going to take that code, translate it into the zeros and ones that the computer needs to actually execute the code. Now let's focus just for a minute here on a place to write the code. Now you have a blistering, confusing amount of options here. It can go as simple as using Notepad on the Windows platform. Just open Notepad, start writing C++ code, or if you're on the Apple Mac platform, you can open TextEdit and just start writing code. Now the obvious drawback here is you don't get any help. You'll have to know the code that you're writing. You have to write it correctly. Nobody's going to check your errors or anything, and so you're kind of on your own. But you can do that. You can just write in Notepad. Now the option that the vast majority of people go with out there in the real world is they will use what's referred to as an IDE, an integrated development environment. Now this is one of those things that we use, but we never really call it what it is. It's kind of like listening to doctors talk about your body parts. You've got those things, but you never think of them that way. And an integrated development environment is usually known to us as the brand name that's put onto it by whoever wrote it, developed it, selling it, whatever. Probably one of the hottest open source free C++ development environments out there right now is something called Code Blocks. You'll notice they have the cute little double colons here. It's kind of a neat geeky thing. Code Blocks can be downloaded for free from www.codeblocks.org. I'd strongly encourage you to go out there and look at it. I'll actually show you an example somewhere here in the course using Code Blocks, just so you'll see something a little different. And then kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum is Visual C++ 2010 Express. Now Visual C++, you'll probably recognize that. It's part of Microsoft's Visual Studio family of development environments. So if you're a Windows developer, or you have been in the past, this is going to be a very familiar environment for you, and this is also free. Just go to microsoft.com/express/downloads, and you will see the link to grab Visual C++ Express. You can download that to your machine, install it, and everything will be great. Now you can go out there and look around and pick pretty much any development environment that you would like to code in, anything that you're comfortable in. In this course, we're going to use Visual C++ 2010 Express for a number of reasons. Number one, it is very familiar to most Windows programmers, well, to most all Windows programmers. It's going to be free. It's very easy to get. It doesn't move around a lot, and it's going to be very easy for you to follow along with me on the live examples. Now when it comes to a compiler, again, this can get very confusing for the newcomers. And a compiler is just simply going to take your programming code and turn it into a language the computer can understand and run. And the choices are pretty wild. I've got a link here for you that's kind of interesting to go look at. www.2, don't forget the 2 there, .research.att.com. And this speaks to, just that URL speaks to some of the history that we'll talk about in a different video here. You may have already seen that one. But this gives you a list of compilers. Now what's interesting is this list was actually created by the man who wrote C++. And you can see quite a few choices out there. Now here's the real bottom line though, and it's the good news. And that is, when you choose an integrated development environment like Visual C++, the compiler is built into the environment. And so you will type out your code, and then we'll go up and we'll basically hit the little green triangle, and this will kick off what's called the debugger. It will allow you to run your code and check it and test it. But when we hit the little run program or debug button or whatever you want to call it, you're going to see something very similar in all the various IDEs. It is grabbing our code, and in the background it's calling a compiler, and it is compiling our code and then the computer is actually executing it. So in a sense, we no longer think about compiling as a separate part of the development process, but indeed it really is. And I'll remind you about that a few times as we go through the course, that every time we're just kind of running a debug version of this, we are actually going through a compilation process. And in a separate video in the course also, we'll talk about linking and compiling and all that so that you understand exactly what's going on. So there's your choices. You can use any kind of development environment you would like. Simple as Notepad, as complex and cool as Visual Studio, and then you'll need to compile it. And I will point that out as we go through here. But don't let the options intimidate you. Get comfortable with one of these is my best advice. Pick one that you like for whatever reason. Get very comfortable with it, and then kind of break out of your shell at some point and go play with some of the others. You may find something you like better. The absolute bottom line here is we are going to be writing standard C++ code. You should be able to take your standard C++ code from any of these environments, put them into another one, and the code should run without a big hassle. All right, so anyway, that's some of the options that you have.